Well. Welcome back to the Dani and John show. Dani, how's it going?
I'm great. How are you, John?
I am good.
Good afternoon. It's finally afternoon. We're recording an afternoon session where we usually do morning sessions. So this is...
Yeah, so that's pretty cool because that means you're not late.
I'm not late.
If it was in the morning, you'd be late.
You know, last time I was 8 minutes late. My timing is getting better. But without further ado, I am so happy and I'm so excited to welcome today's guest, Miss Kendra Petty.
Hey, John. Hey, Dani. Very good to be here.
Kendra
Very exciting.
Petty, author of an amazing book, I Can't Believe I'm Not Dead.
You wear a few different hats.
I do.
So for those of you who, a lot of people know Kendra Petty in our industry, but for those of you who don't, Kendra Petty is an executive with LAZ Parking, and she is a newly author of a great book. I've read the book. It's amazing.
I Can't Believe I'm Not Dead. Incredible. I'm halfway through it.
You haven't even got to the good parts yet.
I'm so excited. I actually was reading it this morning before I was on my way here. And unfortunately, thank you first off for bringing us a signed copy, because I meant to bring mine and I left it on my counter because I was reading it this morning. But an amazing book. We will drop the link on our
website.
On our website.
We'll drop a link so people can get their own copy, but you can go to Amazon, right? It's on Amazon.
Any book retailer.
Okay.
It's available at any book retailer and on my website.
Which is the website?
KendraPettyOfficial.com.
All right. So
KendraPettyOfficial.com, everyone.
So I would love to know how Kendra finds the time to be an author. And you've had a good run, successful in what you're doing right now in the airport space. So kudos to you. But where do you find the time? Holy.
It was a labor of love and hate. It took a lot of time. It took 3.5 years to write the book, but I hired a ghostwriter. I have to be honest. I didn't do all the heavy lifting. I lived all the heavy lifting, but the ghostwriter, Jessica Jones, I owe her a lot. We worked for 3.5 years. She's a published author. She has ghostwritten a number of books that have been published. She used to work for Simon & Schuster and Random House. At those two big houses, she was a publisher and an editor, but she was also responsible for taking books from books to movies and books to TV shows. So her claim to fame, her biggest claim to fame, I guess, is that she found Legally Blonde in the trash and helped make it into a movie.
Nice.
So she was my ghostwriter, and I do want to say working with a creative person is completely different than working with a business people.
Yeah.
It's a different process. So I'm not sure I ever want to have to manage another creative person again. But she's now a dear friend, a very, very dear friend. And she actually helped me find a publisher and helped me get it published. So it was 3.5 years, lots of nights and weekends. It was quite a time commitment.
It's it's amazing. When I picked up the book, first of all, for those of you, I'm not a reader, so I'm not the guy reading on the plane. I'm the guy with listening to the music,
like you are
but
now.
Here I was on a plane reading this book. So I finished the book in a couple days, but I remember reading and getting through like the first 2 chapters, and I had to text Kendra. I was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm sorry," and. It just and so I couldn't drop this book. I had to keep, So
I hear it's a real page turner.
Yeah.
It really is. I read it during the day, not necessarily before going to bed.
Right. That's probably a good idea.
I did. The first time I picked it up, it was, I read a lot before I go to sleep. And so I started reading it before I went to sleep. And then I woke up the next morning. I was like, probably
not a good idea. Right.
During the day kind of read for me.
For sure.
But I Can't Believe I'm Not Dead, Escaping Abuse, Occult, Attempted Murder, and Other Insanities.
So I think the book is pretty much outlines your life and with a lot of trauma. And so in both personal and professional. So I think one of the things when I was reading the book, a lot of people have a lot of, issues, and we deal with certain things at work. We deal with certain things professionally. I guess from, my perspective is most of the time we try to manage those separately. Right. And so I guess one of my questions, you had a traumatic personal life. And so I guess, and there were moments where it was a traumatic work environment. And we just finished an episode of leadership in our industry. And I talked about my crappy bosses, but I don't think they, compare to some of the things in the book. But did you ever have a moment where they were both tracks were disruptive at the same time?
Both my personal life and my work life, for sure I did, but only as a result of what was going on in my work life that it did affect my personal life. So, through my childhood, I had an extremely traumatic childhood, and I developed coping mechanisms for all that trauma and all that tragedy that served me well in my adulthood. So if I ever had anything going on in my personal life, it did not show ever in my work life. But the biggest story in the book is something that happened to me at a company I worked for in the past that was extremely traumatic and affected my personal life, mostly my health, my physical health, for 12 years, some things even to this day. So the attempted murder part is the work part that we're discussing. And it was really hard to recover in my personal life. And part of my healing was from all that was writing the book.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing because I couldn't imagine. I've had trauma in my life, a divorce, and I think it actually propelled my career because it was so traumatic going through that experience, and so I work was my only outlet, and so it propelled me, and I couldn't. That's why I asked that question, because I couldn't imagine having both of those scenarios at once. I mean, that is just an amazing.
For me, though, work was always a priority. My career, building my career, was always a priority, always a focus for me. So when it started to go sideways in the later chapters, you'll read what happened. Myself and some people we've talked about before we started the show worked for a really bad company, really bad people, and it took a toll, especially on me.
Right. We were just talking about that in our last episode about leadership, and if you have bad leadership, it's debilitating. And
especially if your leadership tries to kill you.
Well, yeah. I mean,
that's unbelievable. Hey, out there, my boss, don't try to kill me, please.
Talk about hindrance. Jeez.
I mean, that's incredible. So, so it's, in your case, it highlights that it can even, start affecting your health.
Oh,
and so,
for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I guess that leads to the next question is, I mean, at what point do you say, I'm out of here and I'm out of this industry? Did you ever think about leaving the industry?
In conversations before we started recording, we were talking again about leadership and how leadership at my last industry caused me to leave. I mean, different reasonings, but at some point were you ever it didn't convince you to leave. So why didn't you? Did you ever think about leaving the industry, and why didn't you?
Well, I left that firm, but it took me some time.
Thankfully.
Before I died. I left that firm, but it did take me a little time to figure out my exit strategy because I was so sick from what I had gone through with them. I was just physically very, very sick. And so I was just trying to keep it together, figure out my health, trying not to die, and trying to continue to work while I figured out my exit strategy. And my exit strategy became where I'm at today with LAZ Parking 12 years ago. And so it took a little time.
Yeah.
to work through.
So LAZ has a culture. They give hugs and so it's you went from one extreme, people trying to kill you, to another extreme. How was that transition?
Well, I'm a hugger by nature. I'm a lover by nature. I'm also a fighter by nature. I have to be to survive all I did.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
But I am a lover by nature. So the hugs were, they were fine.
It was a welcome difference from.
It's my first company, Central Parking System, is where I started in the industry in Los Angeles in my 20s, and we'd come together once a year as an organization, all the general managers above, and we all hugged. Everybody hugged.
Right.
So I think that this is, I don't want to take too many steps back, but I think that this is a great opportunity. I would, for. Kendra, I've had the pleasure of just, recently getting to know you. But for people who don't know who you are in the industry and are listening to your story now, how did you get into parking? Would you mind just giving us a brief history on how'd you get here, and how'd you get to where you are now?
Yeah, it's been a long, hard road. It's been a long climb of 29 years, a very long time. I grew up in Oklahoma. I was born on a farm, grew up in Oklahoma. I left right after high school and moved to New York City. I went to college in New York. And
wonderful city, by the way.
Yes, New York. It's a fun city. And I started working in the fashion industry. I went to school, to a school it was a state university of New York, but focused on fashion design and the commercial side, the business side of it. And so I worked in the fashion industry for a few years, and when we talked about bad bosses, it was just not the environment I wanted to work in at all. And so I left New York and moved to LA and had a couple of job offers for what I had been doing in New York. And I had this headhunter kind of chasing me for this parking job. And I was like, what is this parking thing? I lived in New York City 8 years and never thought about when I would park in a garage that there was a company that would manage parking.
Dani, where have you ever heard that? Parking? What is parking?
When you used to look for jobs in the paper. In the classifieds.
So the funny thing is, we did our first episode of introducing us, and I responded to an ad, parking manager, and I had no clue what parking manager was. So I said the same thing you did. So I'm like, parking. Everyone was laughing at me, going, "What is parking?"
Right. Yeah. Especially all the folks back in Oklahoma. But I took the parking manager job because I saw the opportunity, and I stuck with it. The first year I thought I was insane. We had the Northridge earthquake in Los Angeles, and so my office was in the bottom of a garage underground, and so all the office building was constantly moving and shaking above me. I was like, well, I just need to go back to New York. Yeah. But I stuck with it, and I very soon after started being promoted and moving around. Central's mantra back then, I'm sure you remember, John, was if you want to get promoted, you got to move. And so, the more you moved, the more you got promoted. And so I moved a lot and I got promoted a lot. And I left as an executive. I spent probably more than half my career with them of the 14 years as an executive at an executive level. And then I joined this firm that shan't be named, that is in the book, but all the names have been changed to protect the innocent, which is me. And then I was with them as executive vice president for 3 years. And, I didn't leave, back to your question about why didn't I leave the parking industry? We've discussed this before. Once you're in parking, it's so hard to get out. I don't know why, but it kind of sucks you in and you're in it for years. So this is my 29th year, but, and I also did not want them to win. I had questions I needed answered of why things were happening and why things were the way they were. And I wasn't going to let them win. So I wasn't just going to walk away or run away.
I have to say, the Central Parking alum are a pretty close-knit group. Very. And they all love each other, and they talk great about each other. Yeah. And when you see the Central Parking alum in a room, it's like, wow, they're all, that's really cool.
We're all competitors now, but we're all still very good friends.
Right.
I built some of my closest friendships from that time.
This is something that I mentioned before in a few of our different episodes is the reason why I love this industry so much, it's not just because of, that I believe that there are bigger things to do and there's a lot of growth within our industry, but it's the people.
Yeah.
I have made some of the best of friends in this industry, and
they'll be lifelong friends.
Yeah, lifelong friends. It's unlike any other industry. And so the people really, really do it for me. They keep me here. I'm so lucky to be in this industry.
So
unless,
you're lucky.
I am lucky.
I love that. Kendra just pointed to her tattoo on her palm of her hand, and it's it's on the front cover of the book. Lucky. Yeah. So I just have to ask, did you ever pick up Monroe Carroll from his private jet?
I did more than once.
And you pick him up and he wants you to take him downtown and you have to name
Show
all the
everything.
buildings.
That's right. You got to know who runs it. And
who's
how
the
many
property
spaces.
manager.
How many spaces with
everything.
So
what are the rates?
You've done that.
And not just on your properties, everybody else's properties.
He
yeah.
wants to
you
know
need to
who
know.
owns those properties. Yeah,
absolutely.
He wants,
what does everyone else do? Are we price competitive?
Right.
What market rate surveys? Oh, I can tell you all the prices of downtown Denver.
I learned a lot from Monroe. God rest his soul.
Yeah.
He's a good man.
So, in traversing through the book, you have a vacation spot too, right?
I do.
Yeah.
I do. I love Kauai. That's where when I land in Kauai, get in my rental car and start heading to my hotel, I just feel like I'm at home.
So that's like your
I'll actually be there next month.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's incredible. It's just peaceful and beautiful. If you haven't been, you got to go.
I've never been,
but now.
Have you been to Hawaii at all?
I have not been to Hawaii.
Come on, you guys! It's so easy for you.
We're doing a show from Hawaii. What do you think?
Okay,
we can't go to Maui or the Big Island right now.
It's on fire.
It's on fire.
She's
That's
going
terrible.
To Hawaii, and I was telling her I'm going to Italy.
Yeah,
and so that's
incredible.
My vacation. While she's in Hawaii, I'll be in Italy. We'll be sending pictures to you, John.
Yeah.
And so you had a boat.
I did for 18 years.
Yep. So
I was a boater.
How was that?
I loved it. I love the water. When I'm in Kauai, I'm in the water the whole time.
So did you have like a dock space or did you have to launch the boat?
No, listen, I have never towed that boat. I've never towed anything. You would not want me to tow anything. I would have it towed and then I would have it either dry docked where you just call and they put it in the water for you, or depending on the marina, I would have a slip. But I started boating when I lived in Atlanta.
Right.
And then moved to Chicago and boated there. Then
so
Cleveland.
That was kind of a good outlet for you to get away. And I grew up on a lake, so some of the most peaceful times. And then being in the Coast Guard, being out where you can't see anything and you're floating, and it's just very relaxing.
The water's healing. It's
so
peaceful.
Calming. Do you think the reason why you're so drawn to water now, or is because of the calmness that it brings into your life? Maybe because there was a lot of chaos before, or were you drawn to it at points before that?
No, in my childhood I was, although I grew up in Oklahoma, so we didn't have really any water. So I think that just not having it kind of fascinated me. But I also just love what's under the water in the ocean. I could spend all day
just terrifying.
Seeing what's under there. And I have had I've had jellyfish sting my whole face. I've had fish bite me. I had a stingray take a chunk out of my foot in Maui on the same day that I had to go shave my head from chemo because I was losing so much hair. That was quite a day. But I still love the ocean. I'm not too scared.
I grew up in New Mexico, so
no water.
But I think that's a big reason why I love it. But now, and I find myself drawn to the coast, whether I'm on the west or the east. But it terrifies me a little bit because not knowing.
That's why you got to go to the clear water so you can see what's going on under it. Don't get in the water you can't see through.
So I wanted to start a reality show called The Boat Ramp.
The boat ramp?
Yeah, because we'd go out when my daughter was in high school. We had a boat. We'd take her out. We'd go out with the friends, everything. And, you launch in and out of the reservoir every weekend. And some of the things you see on that boat ramp, I mean, we could have a reality show, fights, all kinds of things.
The boat ramp.
And so I think somebody has started a reality show called The Boat Ramp.
Did they?
Yeah.
They took your idea.
They stole your idea.
They frickin' stole it. So
You better go after him.
I'm coming after you, boat ramp. So back to the book. So if there's a professional out there right now in our industry who's working and going through trauma in their life, whether it be private or professional or both, what would be your advice? Because obviously you've overcome and you're very successful in our industry. So what would be your advice to that person?
For me, you have to find your path, right? About 5 years ago, I hit a wall with all this just lifelong trauma and tragedy and PTSD. And I said enough. And I really started, I said, I have to get to the bottom of why this continues to be my cycle in life. I want to live the rest of my life in peace. And so I started reading and learning and seeking to understand how I could, number one, heal my physical body, heal my mind, heal my heart, my soul from all that I had been through, in hopes that it would help me change the trajectory of my life and that I could stop that pattern, that cycle of trauma and tragedy. And through that, I just learned so much of things that work for me. Some of them are listed in the book. The last chapter really focuses on my healing journey. Part of it was writing the book, extremely cathartic, more cathartic than I thought it would be. Even this is cathartic. The things that I've done podcasts, I've done a TV show, I've done some public speaking on the book. Every time I talk about it, it helps heal me. I'd spent my whole life just sort of shoving it down and compartmentalizing it and putting it in a box and putting it aside and saying, I'll deal with you later. So 5 years ago, I said, okay, it's time to deal with all of this. But I think the probably four things that I focus on the most is don't get stuck. Don't get stuck in a bad situation. Don't get stuck in blame, and pointing the finger and saying, this is your fault. Don't get stuck in anger. You've got to move on. You've got to get out of that toxic situation, whether it's work or marriage or, friends. You've got to surround yourself with joy and positive and good things. Second, for me, I started practicing gratitude. And, I'd always been very grateful for my career and, the things that I had, I guess, acquired through my career and the success that I had seen. But really, daily practicing gratitude for everything in my life. Third is, and this is very hard for me, is practicing forgiveness. Forgiving all those that have harmed me. And, in the book,
wow,
you can read, and that's not even everything, but there are so many that have come through my life that have created harm, but also forgiving myself. So forgiving them and forgiving myself. And that's a challenge. I think that's something I will probably work on the rest of my life, but I really do focus on it.
So do you forgive the person that tried to kill you?
I'm trying.
That's,
I think that there's a couple of people that I still have to, including myself, that I still have to work on forgiving. Much of my childhood, I've moved past, except for my brother's situation, and my marriage, I never was angry or held grudges about that situation. But yeah, the work situation is probably the pinnacle. My brother's situation and work is probably the pinnacle and what I have to work on most for forgiveness. But then the last thing that I have to practice is really letting my guard down and letting people back in. Because for years I lived in solitude after what happened to me at work. I just shut down. I didn't let people in my home. I cut off friendships. I only stayed in touch with family and a few close friends. I feared for my life. For a decade, I feared for my life. And that's when I hit the wall and I said, enough. I've really got to change this. I don't want to keep living like this. So really letting my guard down and letting people in and letting love in.
Right. So
I love that. I think that's incredible. Thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely.
So I think it demonstrates an amazing amount of courage to write this book. And then, so you had to be fearful of exposing Absolutely. Your personal trauma in your life. And so it's one thing, to tell people in a personal setting, but now you've got a great book out there. And so from a professional environment, that had to be pretty fearful. How did you overcome that and And thank you, by the way. I mean, that's courageous.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you. When I originally started writing and when I hired Jessica, I said, I don't want to publish this. I just need it all documented. It's so insane. I need it documented for me in a methodical manner. I need it documented for my family, because my family, I would try to explain to them what happened to me at work, and they would just look at me like, they're from Oklahoma, they're, the farm, they haven't really been exposed to a lot, and they would look at me like I was crazy. And so I just wanted it documented. And as we moved through it, Jessica really pushed me to publish. She said, you have to publish this. This story is incredible, and it can help so many people. And the more I thought about it, as we moved through the years, I thought, I have escaped death so many times, so many more than that are in that book. And there's a lot in that book where I've escaped death. There has to be a reason why I'm still alive. Like, why am I still alive? It's certainly not just to be doing what I'm doing. And I'm grateful for what I'm doing, but there's got to be more that I'm supposed to be doing if I have lived these, 900 lives. So I decided the book must be the beginning of what I need to do. And so Jessica helped me find the publisher, and the day, so it took about 4 years from start to finish to get it published, written and edited and published. And the day I was supposed to sign with my publisher, and I never have a panic attack. Like, I am a very calm, cool, collected person. I had a panic attack and I did not sign. And I called two of the people that are in the book that I used to work with. All the names have been changed, so you won't recognize them, but they're still very good friends, and they were with me through all of that insanity with that company. So I called them, and I said, should you talk me off the ledge, or should I just not release this? Because they knew I was working on the book, and we're so proud of you. You need to publish this. This is such a great story. And they encouraged me, and I spent the weekend thinking about it, and I just decided I've got to do it. But I took a lot of steps, I think, to protect myself. And the first step is by changing company names, cities, people's names, so that hopefully no one can drill down and figure out who it is. And hopefully that's a nice insurance policy that, the folks that are still alive with that company will take comfort in that I'm never going to share who they are or any of that information. But it was very trepidatious and very scary for a very long time. But I also have an amazing security system and lots of people looking out for me.
Yeah, and sometimes that's what it takes to start the self-healing journey, right? Is kind of reliving, because that's exactly what you did when writing this book. You relived every moment
again and again
of every trauma, and I can't imagine what that feels like. I'm incredibly close. I have twin brothers who work in the industry, younger than I am, and so close to them. And so having to really relive some of that trauma, especially when it comes to family, over and over again it takes a lot of courage to even be able to face that one part of the many traumas that you go through.
There were two stories in there that are early on in the book that I couldn't talk about, and that I didn't talk about, and that I mean, most people don't know most of that in the book about me, just because I don't talk about it and haven't talked about it. So Jessica, she knew of these two stories, and so she sort of saved placeholders in the book for them. And as we're nearing the end, she's like, we really need to get to these stories. They're so critical and so important to the book. And so I just sat down and I started writing, and it took me maybe 2 months, a month and a half, 2 months. And I just wrote the stories myself, the experiences myself, and edited them and re-edited them, and then gave them to her. And I said, here they are, so I don't have to talk to you about them.
Yeah.
And, if you need to tweak them or edit them, make them flow a little better, fine. She didn't touch them at all. And they're in the book. So some of the things I didn't talk about, but I did have stress about knowing that I was going to need to talk to her about them. They were things that happened in my childhood. And, but she was also like a therapist. She's an incredible woman. Actually, she called me yesterday. I missed her call, but she's an incredible woman who now runs a multimedia company. She owns a multimedia company. She doesn't ghostwrite anymore. I think I ruined her. I think I broke her. She told me when we were done, this was the hardest book I've ever had to write or help write. It was the most emotional, but I've grown the most.
Yeah.
And that's the last book she ghostwrote.
Yeah, I think, because I'm not going to reveal a lot of the detail of the book, because I think people should buy the book and they should go out and read this book. But it's something you said earlier about not blaming yourself in that those first 2 chapters, where you're dealing with your family and the loss. I mean, that was not your fault. I mean, I remember sitting there on a Saturday reading that, and I think I even texted you.
You did.
I was
You
like,
did.
that's how emotional I was. And I was like, in that situation, for you to be blaming yourself, wow, that's no way. It wasn't your fault.
No,
So
I
if I
appreciate
could
that. It's
give you a LAZ hug
LAZ
right
hug.
now,
or a hug.
it's not your fault. So
No, thank you. I appreciate it. And I hear that again and again. And my father has read, I don't know if he's read the whole book, but he's read part of it. And he texts me the same thing. We're not a big talking family, but he texts me the same thing. And I haven't talked to him since the book, or haven't seen him or spoken to him on the phone since he's read it. But I appreciate that. It's hard with guilt. Guilt is such a complex thing. Yeah. And when you live a whole life taking that on, it's really hard to sort of break that down. And that will be also a lifelong process, as I mentioned, forgiveness for myself.
Right.
When you've started the process, healing, you've started the healing journey, and, that's a very courageous thing to do, because a lot of people never take that first step, and it's very unfortunate. And so, I mean,
the way I see it is that day that you signed, like, you're vulnerable because you don't know how people are going to respond to the book, and it's very personal. Right. And so, how is my new leadership going to react? How are these people going to react? So that's why it's just a demonstration of amazing courage, because most people, I would sit here and say probably 85 or 90% of the people couldn't do that.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. It did make me trepidatious because I'm still in the industry. I still work in the industry, but I did speak to my ownership about it.
Right.
I didn't speak about the specifics in the book, but they knew some of the generalities and that it's a memoir, and they were very supportive. But I haven't spent a lot of time marketing it in the industry,
right?
Because I just I'm still getting my head around. This is my first entree into talking about it in the industry.
Well, we are very honored. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
No, I'm honored to be here. Thank you.
Yeah. So, I guess, one of the questions I had was, how do you see going through everything that you've gone through, in a time all throughout with the trauma that you've gone through, to see you rise to a level that you're at and be successful like you are? How do you see women's roles in our industry? Because I know Dani has brought it up, and I think we're going to do a show after this on women in parking. But how do you see women's roles progressing, and how can you utilize your experience and the trauma in this book to help elevate and inspire women to be leaders?
Right. Well, and I would like to just add a little bit to that. Like, you've been in the industry for a while. So from where it was then to where it is now, and the progression.
Right. Specifically as it relates to women, because it's very different today than it was 29 years ago, technology wise. And, we're not taking money in a cigar box. Right. One for you, one for me. It's so many employees
silent
and companies.
Partners out there.
Lots of silent partners. So in that respect, it's changed a lot. In terms of women in leadership, it's moved very, very slowly, very slowly. When I started with Central, there was one female RVP. This was in the mid-90s. And I was the second female RVP at that company. I think we were the only two, but it was progression. I mean, it was the mid-90s and they had female RVPs. If I look at the industry today across the board, women in leadership, especially decision-making roles that are molding the company, that are molding, the growth and the trajectory of the company, it's just not there. It's not there at all. I mean, and I'm speaking across the board as the industry in a whole. Women have in this industry and probably other male-dominated industries have systematically been pushed into business development roles, marketing roles, human resources roles, and not been allowed to have a seat at the table.
Right.
And that's sad. That is, these companies are doing a real disservice to themselves, because there are brilliant leaders that are women out there that can really affect change in companies. And these companies could be so much more and so much better than they are if they allow these women, and I say allow because this is why we're not at the table, because it hasn't been allowed.
Yeah.
Right.
If they allow women to have a seat at the table in a decision-making role that helps make decisions for the company, move that company forward, and mold that company.
I mean, I totally agree. And I think it's one of the things in the future I'd like to help inspire women entrepreneurs in our industry. I know we have several.
We do.
Julie Dixon is one.
Angela Clark. Deborah
Fogel, and pretty successful. And so how do we help facilitate that as a business leader in the industry to help inspire women entrepreneurship within our industry? And then what you just said, more women leadership roles. Right. Steering committee type roles.
There are more, and I was thinking about that after you and I had conversations and we talked about this session and this show. There are women-owned parking companies. There's smaller companies, obviously, and we work with, Sheila Hudson, Angela Clark, Deborah Fogel, all the women that we work with out there that are leaders and cutting edge because they own these parking companies and they grow these parking companies. So kudos to them. And I'd love to see so much more of that. But on the flip side, the corporations, the larger LLCs, all of our competitors, they really have to look themselves in the mirror and make a decision to make a change.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, I agree. It's when I mentioned one of the things that I'm not too fond of about the industry is that it's so male dominated, right? It is often times where I walk into a room and I'm the only woman at the table, which doesn't intimidate me by any means. I have 4 brothers. You're
Dani Crain.
I've always been the only woman in the room on many, many occasions growing up. And, but it would be incredible to see other strong women leaders.
It really would.
At that table.
So I think
helping make the decisions.
I agree with you. It's been slow. There's organizations, I think it's Colonial Parking is named Colleen Neese
Sure.
As CEO, Chief Executive Officer. So that, of course, is quite a leadership role.
It's a big, it's a big shift.
So, I think some of the larger corporations need to probably expedite their drive. I know they all participate. Everybody participates. Yeah. And there's been some change, but I think we've talked about this, Dani. The needle needs to move faster in this industry.
It does.
It needs to progress and not head the other way. So
do you think organizations like, it's WIP, right?
Yes, Women in Parking.
Yeah.
Ruth Beeman, the founder. I was one of the founding members of WIP. I love Ruth and all that she's done for women in parking and the whole organization as it's grown. I was not as active in WIP for a long time after what I went through. I think I shared with you, I shut down and I was just really focused on my health and trying to keep my career going. But I have sort of reinvigorated my involvement in women's organizations, and LAZ is actually, the women at LAZ has formed something called Amplify in the last year. And so I'm on the National Steering Committee for Amplify, and it's to amplify women's voices in LAZ Parking and help create opportunities for women.
That's pretty cool.
So we've created branches throughout the U.S. And so we have, I think, 6 different super region branches, and I'm part of the Southwest, so part of the National Steering Committee, part of the Southwest. And really it's to help mentor our up and coming female leaders and provide them opportunities that they might not have otherwise.
I think that's pretty cool. I didn't know that.
That is great. I feel like this is the first that I've heard of it in the operations world. Mm-hmm, so kudos to you. Kudos to LAZ. That's incredible.
Well, kudos to the ladies that founded it. They invited me to be a part of it, but I didn't found it. So
how are they marketing that? I mean, if we can help out,
it's an internal
It's
Right
internal?
now it's internal to
Okay.
LAZ women, but that is a good idea to think about how can we support the industry, maybe
Right.
branching out. We're less than a year old, but we are doing, we've got educational platforms, some we don't call them training, but some advice platforms. We do coffee chats, we do book clubs, all in the vein of being of professional environment of helping educate and sort of push these women forward in ways that they wouldn't have an opportunity to before.
I would say when the organization gets to a point when they're comfortable that they market something like that, because I think what it does is it incentivizes other organizations, because let's face it, LAZ is a leader in our industry. And a lot of people look over and say, LAZ is doing that, right? So it would probably incentivize a bunch of other companies to do a similar program.
No, I would agree. And now I'm going to give it some thought about how do we externally focus our platform and our processes.
So what do we need? What would we need to do as an industry? Like I'm a male in the industry. What do we need to do to help WIP be stronger? Not that it's not strong now, but how do we make it stronger so it's more prevalent? And
well, I think we need more of WIP, more organizations. WIP is great, and the fact that they've partnered with the MPA makes them even stronger. So definitely supporting WIP, but also founding other organizations. But at the end of the day, it's the leaders of these companies that need to make a decision to put women in decision-making roles, and let them have a seat at the table.
Right.
Yep. Hire more women, John.
I'm all for it.
Well, and I agree. Hiring more women, and I think LAZ does a great job. There's a focus on making sure we have a diverse workforce, but it's what are the roles that these women are in, and making
Honestly,
that shift.
when I board a plane, which is a lot, and I look over and you look in the cockpit and you wave, and sometimes they're looking back. If there's a woman pilot, I actually feel better knowing that there's a woman
You feel
flying
more
the plane.
safe?
I do. I feel a lot
That's
more
awesome.
safe, to be honest with you.
You're in good hands.
That's a true story. It's like, wow, yes, attention to detail.
Attention to detail.
Not risky. I'm loving this.
Well, I don't know about the not risky part.
Yeah.
I rock climb and I do some free
Yeah.
diving.
You are very adventurous.
Wow.
Do you still do a lot of rock climbing?
I do.
So I'm afraid of heights. So wow.
Are you really?
Oh yeah, I could never rock climb.
I would love to see rock climb.
Wow.
Conway.
Yeah,
that
let's
would
go.
be.
I'd have to be harnessed up.
No, I don't use equipment.
No.
No
She
equipment.
Free
Free
It's
climb.
called free climb.
Yeah.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Oh my.
But I'm not hanging from like a 1,000-foot vertical. It's still very dangerous, but it's not crazy.
So in the book you talk, you've broken many bones.
Lots of bones.
How many of them have been from free climbing?
None.
Wow.
None. But this is very sad. I hope we're not almost done because I don't want to end this,
No,
the session on this. But
No.
so I love to climb in various places, but there's a place, I love Sedona. Sedona's beautiful. It's very healing for me. And so I spend as much time as I can there. And there's a particular place that I like to climb there. It's called Bell Rock. And I read about 2 weeks ago that a man from Sedona, who's about 38, was climbing the backside of Bell Rock and slipped, and he was free climbing and he died.
Wow.
And I was in Sedona last weekend, and I was with some friends, and I asked them about it, and they knew this person, and he's a very good climber, very good hiker. And they said, he was climbing the backside, and nobody ever climbs the backside. And I said, well, I climb the backside. I guess I won't climb it anymore, but I climb the backside. So it can be very, very dangerous. You just have to be, very calculated, and very careful.
That's
very
Focused,
careful.
calculated,
Yes.
careful.
I don't wear headphones. I don't listen to music. I don't take
Can't be
people. I go
distracted.
alone. Right. No distractions.
wow. Do you tell people before? So you
I
go.
do. I
You
text
tell
my
people
friends
before
and
you
I
go.
let them know.
Okay.
Yeah. And they're like, text us when you're back.
Right.
Yeah.
We're sending a search party out if you don't come back.
But I've been very fortunate. I mean, I love it. It's very freeing. It's very peaceful when you're out there by yourself.
Well, it's almost like I can only imagine what like how mind freeing that is, because you're not thinking about anything else. You're not thinking about work. You're not thinking about your personal life. You
totally
can only
focused on
think
being safe.
Yeah.
Right.
You
and
are
get it to the top.
Talk about in the moment.
Yeah.
You are very in the moment.
Yes.
You're focused and you have one goal to make it to the top.
It's incredible. I mean, and it's beautiful. You're outside, fresh air, sunshine. It's very freeing.
So you make it to the top. Don't you have to go back
Coming
down?
down's harder. Coming down's harder.
I would
it's
imagine.
more dangerous coming down for sure.
Yeah. I mean, that's.
Yeah.
I was going to say, not skydive off, but free fall off with the.
Oh, right.
I forget what the.
I mean, I'm sure there's some places that you climb and you go up, and then there's probably a way down that you're not climbing.
Right.
But I'm sure there's some spots where you have to climb back down where you came back up, right?
Yeah. I usually don't take the same path down.
Right.
Usually take it. And there's times I get stuck, particularly coming down where I've gotten stuck for 45 minutes, because you kind of jump down and then you're on a little plateau that you think might lead somewhere else and it doesn't. And, there's a little panic there. But
gotta go back up.
You got to go back up. But if you jump down and it's I've never gotten stuck where I've had to be rescued. Knock some wood.
So what other things then, aside from rock climbing, is there any other things?
I love to off-road vehicle. Or I have an off-road vehicle and I love to off-road.
So like a Razor?
Yeah, a four-seater.
Wow.
I took my friends out the other day. And I was like, are you guys sure you want me to open this all the way up? And they're like, yeah, do it.
So my wife and I, who you guys just met, we were in Cabo once and rented a Razor. And what an experience. We were along the beach and then you go up into some hills and those things they're fast.
They're very fast.
That can be dangerous.
There are some states that you're allowed to drive them on the street if you register them. So I own one and I take it up in Sedona when I get to make it there, up a path called Schnebley Hill Road. And at times, and it's very rocky, very bumpy, and at times it's only, a one-lane road, like gravel, dirt, boulders, rocks. And then once you get to a certain, the tours will only go so far, and then they turn around and go back. But all the Jeeps and the off-road vehicles will keep going. And there are times when you're on that road where it is it's probably a 3,000-foot drop. So if you go off the side of that road, that's it. But it's beautiful. I mean, it's stunning.
So only in Mexico, we rented the Razors and then they take you on like a tour and you stop like 2 or 3 times and they have these outdoor bars.
Oh, nice.
And they give you shots and
No
beers.
drinking allowed on my Razor. It's way too dangerous.
Talk about a dangerous mix of.
They give you shots and beers and then send you on your way on the Razor.
Drive?
Literally.
Drive?
Yeah.
Oh my God. That's funny.
Have some shots of tequila and be on your way.
I mean, I want to see that insurance policy.
That's funny. That reminds me. I bought a car a couple years ago and I did the delivery experience. I didn't want to originally, but they kept pushing me. So I went to LA for the delivery experience of this car, and they have a restaurant there, and they feed you before they put you on the racetrack and teach you to race in a like car of what you bought. And they bring me and my friend the menu, and they're like, "Would you like wine or a cocktail?" They have a full bar, and I'm like, "I'm about to drive a car that is your car, very expensive. You really want me to drive a cocktail or drink a cocktail before I drive?"
That's if you've been to Florida, or they might be all over, but the Ford garage. So it's a concept where they have this bar restaurant attached to the dealership. So when you go and you bring your car into service, you're in the Ford garage and you eat and drink.
They send you on your way with your car.
Sending you on your way with your own car,
people are sitting,
hoping that you make it not very far because you got to bring it back for another.
Right. People are sitting there drinking and eating, waiting for their car.
Denver?
So
Florida.
This was in between Jacksonville and Daytona.
Okay.
Is where I experienced. It's called Ford Garage.
That is
it's attached to a Ford dealership.
What a concept.
Literally. Yeah.
Could you imagine if we had bars attached to our parking garages with that?
Right. Well, here's the other thing though. In sales, you give somebody a cocktail, they're a little more relaxed. They're more inclined to spend money. So there's probably people buying vehicles.
They're like, you don't need new windshield wipers, but we can charge you $1,200 for these brand new ones. And you're like, why would I not want the best of the
leather
best?
seats?
Yeah.
That's why in the U.S., when you're doing a timeshare thing, like if you're up in the mountains, they can't serve you alcohol. But if you're in Mexico, They sit there and get you drunk.
Oh, that has to be a lie because
I'll
I was
be in Mexico in a week, so I look forward to that.
I was in Hilton Head last year, and we did this tour of a timeshare. And I think it was Hilton. And they're like, can we get you anything to drink?
Right.
Would you like a bottle of
sign on the
bubblies?
dotted line quicker.
Exactly. What is it going to take for you to sign here?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Some bubbles.
So Kendra, what is, if as we near the end of the show here, and for people that haven't read your book and are thinking about going out and buying your book, what is the message you want to send to those people as they're deciding whether they buy your book or not?
Sure. Well, first, it's a hard read, and I've had a lot of people tell me that. I've had so much outreach, and it's been very positive outreach. But I have had people reach out to me to say I couldn't put the book down. I read it in a day. I read it in 2 days, 3 days. But I've also had a lot of people reach out to me. I cried the whole way through the book. So first, I would like to say it's a very hard read. It can be emotional and tough to get through, but the end is worth it. The last chapter is really full of, my healing path. And, throughout the book, there's some very funny stories, the Snoop Dogg story and some other great stories. So, it's not all bad, but it is a tough read. But if you hang in there, it has a happy ending.
Right. So have you gotten feedback from the professional side, even though you haven't really done a lot of marketing out?
I haven't, except I was at a conference, and I think you were there. I can't remember which conference it was, and it was not that long ago. And maybe you told me this, or somebody told me, or it could have been Stan, your book is the talk of the conference. And I was like, I didn't even think people knew about my book.
Right.
Yes. Yeah. And so then I got a little nervous, right? Because I had not been talking about it at work. But the feedback's all been phenomenal. I did have a former client make a small comment about some of the things I included about my personal life in the book. And, and she said, why did you do that? I said, well, it's a memoir. It's not a business book. It's not a self-help book. I mean, there's some things in there that will definitely help some people. Especially the last chapter.
Right.
But it's a memoir, and it's my life, and those things are a part of my life, and they're an important part of it. They're what helped mold me. But other than that, I haven't really gotten any negative feedback at all. But my publisher, for the first 90 days or so, managed all my social media, and I got a lot of really good feedback in my social media, but I also got some uncomfortable outreaches from people I didn't know, which was a little strange and uncomfortable because before I never really used social media. I shut all my social media down after I went through what I did with that company.
Right.
But my publisher said, you need social media. So, I had a Facebook that I never really used. So I turned that over to them, and had an Instagram that I just watched videos on. So I turned that over to them. And so, we've had some good growth from that and good feedback. But as far as industry feedback, not a lot yet, but I really have not. This is really my entree into.
Right.
Took a lot for me to get there, but you're a good friend, and so with both of you and your support, that has made a big difference for me.
I'm super glad that we're your first vehicle into the industry to share
my
this.
Cherry.
When I met you at John was telling me about what an incredible human you were, and I could not wait to meet you at IPMI, and so I'm thankful for you, and I'm grateful for you, and thank you so much for sharing your story and
thank you for the opportunity,
being here with us today. And you have an army of an incredible industry behind you now, and so
and we're going to continue to follow your success because you're on a roll.
You're not going to try to murder me. So
no, we definitely won't. And if somebody does that, call me. We'll find them. Trust me.
We'll find them for you. How about that?
We got people.
There you go.
Anyways, I think that's it for today's episode. And, thank you again, Kendra, for being here, and all the listeners in our industry. This is a must read. So go out. It will inspire you. It'll keep you it'll help you find a way to be tenacious and never giving up, which is what Kendra demonstrates, obviously, with her success through all this. So thank you very much.
Thank you, John.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Kendra.
Dani.
Thank you.